She was 29, single, and tired of pretending she was fine. Claire stood in the middle of the glittering Houston ballroom holding her 8-year-old daughter's hand, and for one dizzy second she thought her knees might give out. She had promised Maribel a night of fun, told her it would just be a wedding with music and food. But the moment her eyes caught the man at the altar, everything inside her went still. Daniel. The only man she had ever loved, the man who walked away without knowing he was leaving more than a broken heart behind. Her chest burned as she tried to breathe through the violins and laughter. She told herself she could get through it, that Maribel didn't need to see her panic. But her daughter tugged on her dress and whispered far too loudly, "Mom, why does that man look like me?" The words shot through the air like a firecracker, pulling every head in the room toward them. Guests turned. Whispers spread like wildfire. And Daniel, his face pale, his jaw tight, stared straight at the little girl he didn't know he had. Would you have stayed in that room, or would you have turned around and run? He didn't look away. For 10 years she had wondered what would happen if he ever saw her again. Now she knew. His blue eyes locked on her like the world had narrowed to only the three of them. Eloise, her best friend, stood at the altar glowing in her wedding dress, but even she noticed his distraction. The officiant tried to keep speaking, but the energy in the room had shifted. Claire wanted to drag Maribel outside, to disappear before things exploded. But her feet refused to move. The child's question hung in the air like smoke no one could clear. Daniel blinked, his lips parting, and for a moment Claire thought he might stop the entire wedding. Instead, he forced a smile, reached for Eloise's hand, and pretended nothing had changed. His eyes betrayed him, though. They were still locked on the little girl who looked too much like him to be ignored. What would you have done? Sat quietly in the back, or pulled your child away before anyone noticed? They weren't supposed to fall in love, at least not the way it happened. 10 years earlier, she was a college sophomore in Dallas, waiting tables to cover her books. He was the son of a wealthy oil family, wearing pressed shirts and driving cars she couldn't name. He had no business noticing her. But he did. He sat in her section every Tuesday, asked about her classes, and slipped her notes instead of phone numbers. He didn't laugh at her small-town background, he admired it. She thought his love was enough to fight the world. But the world fought back harder. His parents called her names: gold digger, distraction, mistake. Daniel swore he'd never listen to them. Until one night, he showed up at her apartment shaking, his father's words ringing louder than his own heart. He broke things off without explanation. She begged, she cried, but he walked out. Weeks later she found herself sitting on the bathroom floor, holding a plastic stick with 2 pink lines, whispering into the silence that she'd never tell him. He had chosen power over her. And now here he was, in a black tuxedo, vowing to another woman as if none of it had happened. The chandeliers flickered as though mocking her. Claire's best friend Eloise smiled at the crowd, veil shimmering, but there was a sharpness in her eyes that only Claire recognized. She knew her friend well enough to sense the tension. Daniel's gaze was a knife cutting through his vows, slicing into her with every stolen glance. Claire tried to steady her breathing, tried to tell herself she was imagining it. Maribel leaned against her side, tired from the long day, completely unaware that her innocent words had cracked open a secret bigger than either of them could handle. Claire debated standing and leaving, but something inside her, a stubborn streak born from every hard year alone, kept her glued to the seat. She wouldn't run. Not again. Daniel's voice shook when he promised to love and honor Eloise, and for a terrifying second, Claire thought he might confess everything. But instead, he clenched his jaw, finished the vow, and kissed the bride while still staring at her across the crowd. The applause echoed like thunder in her chest. She pulled Maribel toward the aisle, praying no one stopped them. But just before she reached the door, she felt a hand grip her wrist. She spun around, ready to snap at some curious guest, only to find Daniel standing inches away. His tuxedo was perfect, his smile forced, but his eyes were raw, stripped of every wall. "She's mine, isn't she?" he whispered, his voice sharp and shaking at once. Claire froze. She wanted to lie, wanted to protect her daughter from the man who had already abandoned them once. But her lips trembled, and the truth slipped out before she could stop it. Yes. The air around them felt like it could break. Daniel's hand still clung to her wrist, his eyes burning into hers, but Claire yanked free before the guests could notice. She shoved through the crowd, pulling Maribel behind her, ignoring the gasps and whispers that chased her to the door. Outside, under the glow of the street lamps, her heart hammered so hard she thought she might collapse. Maribel looked up, confused. "Mom, why are you shaking?" Because the man who left her was now demanding answers. Because the secret she had carried for almost a decade had just exploded in front of her daughter. Daniel stormed out moments later, jacket half undone, tie loose, his perfect groom image shattered. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low but urgent. She wanted to scream that he had no right. Instead, she turned to her daughter and whispered, "Go wait in the car, baby." The child hesitated, sensing the storm between them, but obeyed. Alone now, Daniel's voice broke. "You hid her from me. Would you have admitted everything, or would you have lied one more time?" Eloise's laughter carried faintly from the ballroom, but Claire knew her best friend had seen enough to connect the dots. She could feel Eloise's betrayal boiling like an invisible fire, and it terrified her almost as much as Daniel's sudden claim. Eloise had once held her secrets, had once sworn they were sisters in everything but blood. But now Eloise was his wife. And Claire's silence looked like treachery. She remembered late nights when Eloise comforted her through heartbreak, how she shared her own dreams of marrying into Daniel's world. They used to trade promises, pinky swears that nothing, not men, not money, would ever come between them. Now Eloise had both, and Claire was the uninvited ghost at her wedding. Inside, the music swelled as the first dance began. Eloise clung to her new husband, but her eyes never left the door where Claire had stood. Claire could already feel the walls closing in. If Eloise demanded the truth, Daniel wouldn't be the only one whose world collapsed. What would you fear more, losing the man who broke you, or the friend who once saved you? That night didn't end quietly. Daniel tracked her down to the small hotel where she had booked a room, thinking she could hide until morning. He knocked hard enough to shake the doorframe. She opened it an inch, but he shoved it wide, stepping inside with a fury that made her heart leap. "You owe me the truth," he said, his voice trembling more from pain than anger. "Is she mine?" Claire stood with her back against the wall, arms crossed, every nerve screaming. "She doesn't need you," she shot back. "She's had me. That's enough." But Daniel wasn't backing down. He looked around the room, saw Maribel's small shoes by the bed, her doll tucked under the blanket. His chest rose and fell like he had been punched. He whispered, "She looks just like my sister did at that age." Claire's throat tightened. He wasn't supposed to see it. He wasn't supposed to feel it. Yet here he was, putting the pieces together with every breath. And when he finally turned back, his voice broke. "I lost you once. Don't take her from me too." Would you have let him back in, or slammed the door forever? The next day, Claire's worst fear came true. Daniel didn't just leave quietly. He showed up at her apartment unannounced, waiting in the parking lot until Maribel came running out to play. He knelt, looked into her eyes, and something unspoken passed between them. Maribel tilted her head, studying him the way children do when they sense familiarity. "Do I know you?" she asked softly. Daniel's voice cracked. "Not yet." Claire rushed outside, furious and terrified. Neighbors peeked through blinds, already gossiping. One photo, one whisper, and the entire city would know that the oil prince's golden image was cracking. Claire yanked Maribel back, hissing at him. "You had your chance years ago. Stay away." But Daniel didn't budge. "She's mine, Claire. I can feel it. And if you don't let me be part of her life, I'll find another way." What would you do? Protect your daughter with silence, or risk letting the man who broke you claim her? By morning, it wasn't just neighbors whispering. Headlines blared across social media. "Who is the little girl who stopped Daniel's wedding?" Paparazzi circled the block. Photos of Claire and Maribel walking hand in hand appeared with captions calling her the mystery mother. Every comment was sharper than the last. Some called her a liar, others accused her of trapping him. The world didn't know the truth, but it already had its villain. Claire shut off her phone, shaking. Maribel was too young to understand why strangers suddenly cared about her face. She asked if she did something wrong. Claire held her tight and whispered, "You did nothing wrong, baby. Nothing at all." But the storm was here, and she had no control over it. Daniel's family would see the headlines. Eloise would see them too. And once the world decided whose story to believe, Claire knew her daughter's life would never be the same. Would you fight the storm, or disappear before it swallowed you? The phone rang in the middle of the night. Claire jolted awake, her heart pounding before she even answered. On the other end was a nurse from the hospital. Her mother had collapsed. Within minutes, Claire was out the door, rushing through empty streets with Maribel asleep in the back seat. The hospital lights felt too bright, too sterile, as if they exposed every hidden fear. She sat beside the bed, holding her mother's fragile hand, trying to swallow the guilt pressing in her chest. Her mother's voice was weak. "You kept him from his child." Claire froze. She hadn't expected judgment from the one person who always defended her. "I did what I had to," she whispered. But her mother's eyes stayed sharp. "You can lie to me, but don't lie to yourself. Secrets don't protect. They destroy." Would you have confessed then, or carried the silence even longer? Days later, the walls kept closing in. Daniel refused to fade into the background. Eloise, furious and humiliated, launched a storm of her own. She posted carefully staged photos with Daniel, smiling wide as if nothing had happened, while quietly feeding reporters stories about Claire. Whispers turned to accusations. Online comments called her a manipulator, a woman desperate for attention. Claire felt the weight of the world pressing against her lungs. And yet, in the shadows of that chaos, Daniel kept showing up. He called. He waited outside Maribel's school. He sent small gifts, not to Claire, but to the daughter he was desperate to know. Each gesture chipped at the wall she had built. She hated him for leaving her once, but she hated herself more for noticing the sincerity in his eyes now. Was he fighting for his daughter, or fighting for her? The real betrayal came not from strangers, but from blood. Claire's older brother, the one she had trusted with her secret years ago, sold her story to the media. Every detail, how she met Daniel, how she hid the pregnancy, how she struggled alone, splashed across headlines like ammunition. He admitted it was for money. He didn't even look ashamed. Claire's heart cracked in ways Daniel never managed. Betrayal from a lover was one thing. Betrayal from family cut deeper. Maribel read part of an article over her shoulder, eyes wide. "Mom, why are they saying Daddy's name with mine?" The innocence in her voice shattered her. She had worked for years to keep her child safe from that world, and now her own brother had dragged them into it. Would you forgive a family member who sold your life, or would you cut them out forever? Daniel found her crying on the balcony that night. For the first time, he didn't argue, didn't demand. He simply stood beside her, quiet, the city lights flickering in the distance. Then, in a voice softer than she expected, he said, "Marry me." The words landed like a stone in water, rippling through every scar she carried. She laughed bitterly, wiping her eyes. "You already did. Remember. To my best friend." "I never loved her," he admitted. "Not the way I loved you. Not the way I still do." She wanted to hate him, wanted to spit in his face. But his confession hung in the air, undeniable, tempting. He spoke of building a future, of giving Maribel the family she deserved. Claire's heart wavered between rage and longing. Would you believe a man who once left you, or push him away even if part of you still loved him? The storm never fully passed, but it settled into something bearable. Claire didn't forgive easily. She didn't forget. Yet she allowed Daniel into Maribel's life, if only to give her daughter the father she had always wanted. Eloise vanished from the public eye, her glittering marriage nothing more than a broken headline. Claire's brother disappeared too, lost in the shadows of his betrayal. On the quiet days, when Maribel laughed with Daniel in the park, Claire would watch from the bench, torn between pride and fear. Love wasn't simple. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And for the first time, she let herself imagine a tomorrow that wasn't built on secrets. Still at night, when the house grew silent, a single thought lingered like a whisper she couldn't silence. Did I save us, or did I just open the door to lose everything again?